How far would you walk just to hear a man speak? Would you leave your nets behind, let bread cool on the fire, carry your baby on a sunlit slope just to listen? What if the journey was long, the destination unknown, and the promise of comfort came not in silver or status, but in words? Tonight's story begins not in a palace, not in a temple, but on a ragged Galilean hillside. The breeze is warm and dry, curling around your ankles like the edge of a linen robe. The ground is uneven, dusted with time and loose stones. And yet, people are climbing. You are climbing. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're joining from somewhere new, let me know in the comments your city, your local time. I love seeing where we dream together from. Now dim, the lights maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge uphill, sandals worn throat a little dry. Around you murmurs rise and fall. Children weave between adults. A woman balances water on her head. A Roman soldier watches from afar, pretending not to care. You don't know what you expect. Maybe a speech, maybe a miracle. What you don't expect is the quiet. There's no shouting, no trumpet, no crowd control. Just people pressing closer, not for bread this time, not for healing, but for something slower, something quieter, something eternal. At the top, he's already there. Jesus. No robe finer than yours, no sandals newer. But his presence stills the hill like a held breath. He scans the crowd, not in judgment, but invitation. You sit beside a mother nursing her child. A boy offers you half a fig. You take it. Sweet. Sticky. Just enough. And then he speaks. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The words are soft, but they hit hard, like water into cracked clay. You blink. Poor in spirit. You'd expected something grander. Maybe a call to arms, a prophecy, a new law. Instead, you get emptiness, spiritual poverty. And he says, that's where heaven begins. You glance at the man beside you, hands cracked, brow furrowed. He looks just as confused. Jesus continues, Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. There's no thunder, no angels, just stillness. But something happens in that stillness. You feel it. A pull, a flicker, as if someone just lit a candle in a cave you didn't know you had. Each beat of the sermon sounds like an upside-down drum. Strength isn't blessed, sorrow is. Power isn't prized, meekness is. Blessed are the meek, he says, for they will inherit the earth. You think of Babylon, of Assyria, of Rome just over the hill. What could meekness possibly inherit besides more hardship? And yet he says it not like a dream, but a certainty. Historians still argue whether this sermon happened in one sitting or was stitched together from many moments, but no one debates its effect. These words didn't just last, they reshaped everything. A quirky detail. The word meek in Greek prose also means power under control, like a trained warhorse, so not weak but dangerous if necessary and utterly calm. Jesus moves on. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. You swallow. The fig is gone. But something else is growing in you now, a craving not for bread or wine, but for rightness, for wholeness, for the world to finally make sense. For they will be filled. A woman to your left wipes her eyes. A child fidgets. A fisherman closes his eyes just for a moment. Blessed are the merciful. You think of someone who hurt you last year. Their name is a splinter in your chest. You wonder what it would feel like to pull it out. For they will be shown mercy. It keeps going. Clean hearts, peacemakers, persecuted souls. Every line is a doorway. Every blessing a brick in a kingdom no one can see. And then he says it. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you. You wins. And falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. You weren't ready for that. But his voice is still calm, still sure. Rejoice and be glad, he says, because great is your reward in heaven. You realize something, he's not trying to rally you. He's revealing something already true. Not if, but when you're insulted. Not one day, but now the kingdom belongs to the broken, the quiet, the unseen. The sun shifts. Someone nearby offers you water. You shake your head gently. You're full in a different way. Jesus looks over the crowd again. And then he says, You are the salt of the earth. You sit up. Not the stars, not the kings. You. And he doesn't mean seasoning. He means preservation, purity, worth. But then a warning. If the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? Your chest tightens, because you know what it means to lose flavor, to grow dull, to forget. Jesus doesn't pause. You are the light of the world. You look down. A child has drawn a sun in the dust. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, he says. You remember something. You don't know from where. A light on a hill, a lantern in a storm, a tiny flame that shows the way home. Let your light shine before others, he says, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. And just like that, your fig-stained hands feel like lanterns. The fig sweetness still lingers faintly on your tongue, but now it's layered with something more, something sharper, something sacred. You're still on that hillside knees, slightly aching from the slope, but you don't move, because Jesus is still speaking, and every sentence feels like a step into another world. He lifts his gaze slightly, eyes scanning the ridge, the sea of expectant faces, and then he says something that silences even the wind. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. The law, the backbone of your people. The prophets, the voices that once cracked the sky. You feel your chest tighten. I have not come to abolish them, Jesus says, but to fulfill them. Fulfill. You expected him to disrupt, to declare a new path, to break old rules. But instead, he promises continuity, completion, not contradiction. Historians still debate what Jesus meant by fulfill. Did he mean to embody the law in flesh, to show its true purpose, or to bring it to its final transcendent form? Whatever the answer here on this dusty hill, the word feels like a bridge. Ancient truth stepped into with bare feet. Jesus speaks of the smallest details, jots and tittles, tiny flourishes of ink in Hebrew letters. Not the smallest letter, he says, not the least stroke of a pen will disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. A scribe nearby leans forward. You notice the way his hand tightens on his scroll. Then the tone shifts. Jesus warns anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. You feel the stakes rise, not just in words but in weight. And then the line that punches the air from your lungs. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. A murmur ripples through the crowd. Surpass them, the men with perfect robes and memorized verses. You glance down at your own dusty feet, your hands still rough from the morning's chores. How could you ever reach that high? But Jesus isn't finished. He begins a list. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, you shall not murder. You nod. Of course, it's law. But I tell you, he says that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. You flinch. Anger. That doesn't feel fair. Murder is a deed. Anger is a spark. But Jesus speaks of sparks like they can burn down entire forests. Again he says, you have heard it was said, you shall not commit adultery. A man nearby crosses his arms. You can feel the tension rise. But I tell you, Jesus continues that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Now the crowd stirs more. You glance sideways. No one meets your eyes. Jesus keeps going. He speaks of oaths, of revenge, of divorce. He speaks of turning the other cheek, of giving more than asked, of loving enemies. Mini hooks in every breath. Truths you didn't ask for, but somehow knew you needed. Give to the one who asks you, he says. Do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Your mind argues. What if they don't return it? What if they take advantage? But your heart is quieter now. You have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Love your enemies. No one gasps. No one laughs. But you can feel the strain in the silence. Because this isn't religion anymore. It's relationship. It's risk. It's radical. Jesus says this is how you'll be children of your Father in heaven, by loving those who don't love you back. And then be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. You exhale sharply. Perfect. That's impossible, isn't it? A quirky historical note. The word perfect here, teleos, can also mean complete or whole. Not flawless, but matured. Like fruit ripened by time and sun. So maybe Jesus isn't demanding flawlessness. Maybe he's inviting you into fullness. You watch as someone behind you slowly lowers their head into their hands, not in shame, in surrender. Because now the sermon isn't just hard, it's holy. It's a ladder that no one can climb alone. You remember when Jesus said, you are the light of the world. And now he's showing what that light looks like. It's not just belief, it's behavior. It's forgiveness instead of fury, generosity instead of judgment, mercy over might. He's not lowering the bar. He's raising the heart. The sun begins to lean westward. A soft glow spreads across the field. But the sermon continues as quietly relentless as the tide. No one moves, not even the wind. You're not sure when your hands started trembling. It's not fear, not exactly. It's the weight of it all. Because as Jesus speaks, every layer of your defenses is quietly peeled away gently but without pause. And now he turns to something even deeper. He begins to speak about giving. And this time it's not about how much you give, but how. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them, he says. You blink. That hits, harder than expected, because who hasn't done it? That extra coin dropped just a little louder in the temple box. That kind word spoken just loud enough for others to hear. Jesus continues, if you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. Not punished, just nothing gained. You feel that. It lands like a stone in a silent room. He says, so when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets. A chuckle rises from the crowd. It's absurd, blowing trumpets to show generosity. And yet, the image sticks. It's funny, but it's also familiar. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Jesus says so that your giving may be in secret. And suddenly you understand. This isn't about looking good. It's about being good when no one's watching. Then Jesus talks about prayer. You brace yourself. Because prayer is sacred, but he doesn't start with reverence. He starts with critique. When you pray, do not be like the hypocrites. He says, for they love to pray, standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Again, that theme. Visibility versus sincerity. He says they've received their reward, but he gives a better way. When you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. You picture it a tiny room, no windows, no audience, just you and God. He says, your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. You've never thought of prayer as something quiet enough to whisper small enough to fit behind a closed door. And then he says it. What might be the most famous prayer in history? Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. You mouth the words along though you've never heard them this simply before. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It's so straightforward, so gentle. Give us today our daily bread. You smile softly, because isn't that what you're doing right now? Receiving the bread of wisdom bite by bite. And forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. You feel a twinge. Forgiveness again. Always that return to the heart's hardest work. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. He finishes. No embellishment, no dramatic pause, just truth. Historians still debate whether this prayer was composed in full that day or shaped later from Jesus' teachings. But the rhythm of it, the humility, the clarity, feels eternal. A quirky detail. Some scholars believe this was the first time an open invitation was given to address God so intimately as Father, not distant, not unapproachable, but close. Jesus adds one more thing, a warning and a promise. For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. You wait. There's a but. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins. You sit with that. It's not angry. It's not even sharp. But it's real. Forgiveness isn't optional. It's vital. And again, Jesus moves on. He talks now about fasting. You've seen the proud faces before men in ash women with smeared cheeks announcing their suffering with loud sighs and tired stares. He says, when you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do. Instead, put oil on your head and wash your face. Look fresh, look whole, look unseen, so that your Father again, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. The theme is unmistakable. God sees what others don't, and that's what matters. Not applause, not status, but the sacred unseen. He turns now to treasure. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, he says, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. You glance at your satchel. It holds a few coins, a worn cloth, a ring from your mother. Jesus isn't against treasure. He's against the kind that fades. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Things no moth can touch, no thief can steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. You whisper that to yourself. Because it's more than a sentence. It's a mirror. Where is your treasure? What owns your worry? Your focus? Your hope? Jesus says the eye is the lamp of the body. And if your eyes are healthy, generous, clear-focused, then your whole body will be full of light. But if they're not, if your eyes are unhealthy, he says your whole body will be full of darkness. You feel that. How much you see or refuse to see shapes everything. And then, almost like a final drumbeat, he says, no one can serve two masters. You can't serve both God and money. You can't light two fires and expect one heart. You can't build two kingdoms and expect one soul. You close your eyes. And you feel it all settling in, not like a burden, but like gravity. Truth that pulls you towards something real, something firm, something forever. Your eyes are still closed, but the weight of his words lingers. Not heavy like guilt, heavy like meaning, like something that matters. And then you hear him say softly, like he's reading your thoughts, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life. You open your eyes. Did he really just say that? Not worry. You glance around. A woman nearby holds her child close. An older man rubs the back of his neck, his brows drawn tight. Someone further back clutches a sack so tightly you can see their knuckles pale. He continues, what you will eat or drink, or about your body what you will wear. It's almost funny. Is there anything you think about more than those things? Food, water, clothing, safety, the next day, the next minute. Jesus says, is not life more than food and the body more than clothes? You don't answer out loud, but the question sits with you. Then he does something strange. He points. Look at the birds of the air. You follow his gaze. Above, two sparrows dart through the air like dancers, weightless, free, fearless. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, he says, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. You watch the birds circle land flutter again, and something loosens in you. Are you not much more valuable than they? Your throat tightens, because you've never thought of it that way. You've thought of God as ruler, creator, even judge. But this, a father who feeds sparrows and calls you more. A quirky historical footnote. Sparrows were among the cheapest creatures sold in ancient marketplaces, 5 for 2 coins, so worthless they were often thrown in free. And yet, Jesus says not one falls without God noticing. So, what about you? He presses the point further. Can any one of you by worrying add a single hour to your life? You want to laugh, not because it's funny, because it's true. Worrying feels useful, but it's a treadmill, all sweat, no distance. And why do you worry about clothes? He continues. See how the lilies of the field grow. You look again. All around, tiny wildflowers peek through the grass, vibrant and shameless. They do not labor or spin. Jesus says, yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. Solomon the golden king, known for wisdom, wealth, and robes that glittered in the sun. And yet flowers outshine him. Jesus adds, if that is how God clothes the grass of the field, will he not much more clothe you? You have little faith. It's not a rebuke. It's a reminder. You are seen. More than birds. More than flowers. More than your fears. So do not worry, he says, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? You nod slowly. Not because the questions don't matter, but because suddenly they don't rule you. For the pagans run after all these things, he says, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. That's the line that gets you. He knows. Before you ask, before you beg, before you panic, he knows. Jesus offers something better, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, he says, and all these things will be given to you as well. Not forgotten. Given, not replaced. Reordered. So now you know where to start, not with fear, but with the kingdom. He says, therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. You exhale. It feels like the first full breath you've taken in years. And then he adds, each day has enough trouble of its own. You smile. Not because it's easy, but because it's honest. Jesus doesn't promise a painless life. He promises a present God, the kind who feeds birds and clothes grass, the kind who whispers peace over panicked hearts, the kind who shows up in lilies and wind and children offering figs, the kind who sees what you do in secret and rewards it openly. Historians still marvel at how this portion of the sermon remains the most universally quoted across time and belief. From hospital rooms to graduation speeches, these words find their way into human hearts like sunlight finds cracks in old stone. You stand slowly. The hill hasn't changed, but you have. Because now you're not just a listener, you're a seeker. And you know what you're seeking. Not safety, not applause, not perfection. The kingdom. You take a step. And for the first time, tomorrow doesn't feel like something to fear. It feels like a door waiting to open. You're still walking when he shifts the tone again. And this time it stings. Do not judge, Jesus says, or you too will be judged. The words hang in the air like incense pleasant to hear, but with a bite that reaches your lungs. You slow your pace. Because this isn't just about the Pharisees or temple rulers or the ones who look down on you. It's about you. You the one who rolled your eyes yesterday at your neighbor's mistake. You the one who scoffed at someone's accent, someone's clothes, someone's choice. You the one who decided you knew someone's whole heart based on one crooked glance. Jesus says, "For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged." You feel that. Not a punishment. A reflection. Like standing in front of water and seeing your own face looking back. He says, with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. You glance at your hands. What have you been measuring? Grace or grit? Kindness or contempt? Then comes the image. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye? He asks, and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye. A chuckle ripples through the crowd. Because it's ridiculous. A man walking around with a plank sticking out of his eye, pointing at dust in someone else's. But the laughter dies quickly, because it's also true. How often do you critique others while ignoring what's heavy in you? How can you say to your brother, "Let me take the speck out of your eye," when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You want to answer, but you can't. Because there it is, that image again, a mirror. He says, "You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." Not, don't help. Just help from a place of humility, of clarity, of gentleness. Historians still argue whether this line was meant to dismantle all judgment or simply correct its posture. But in context, it feels like a call to clean your lens before you offer to clean someone else's. Jesus moves forward. Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. That one takes longer to settle. The metaphors are sharp, surprising. Is he warning against waste, against sharing truth too soon, or is this about knowing when to speak and when to wait? Scholars debate that one too, but you take it as this truth is precious, and it's okay to guard it with wisdom. Then his tone softens again, and he says something that feels like a door creaking open. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be open to you. You pause mid-step, because it's not a command, it's a promise. Ask, seek, knock. 3 actions, all within reach. He adds, for everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks the door will be opened. Not might, will. He keeps going. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? You laugh gently. It's absurd. And if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake. A few children giggle nearby. You smile. Jesus does too. If you, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, he says, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? You close your eyes for a second, not to escape, to soak, because here is the picture of God you've longed for. Not distant, not watching for mistakes, but waiting to give, not cold, not cruel, but good. And then without pause, he offers a golden thread. So in everything he says, do to others what you would have them do to you. It's familiar. It's ancient. But here, spoken like this, it becomes fresh again. For this sums up the law and the prophets. All the rules, all the scrolls, all the sermons, folded into one line. Treat others how you want to be treated. You sit down because your knees feel weak now, not from the hill, from the hope that maybe this life isn't about climbing ladders, but walking humbly, that maybe this kingdom doesn't belong to the clever or the connected, but to the quiet, the kind, the ones who ask, who seek, who knock. A quirky observation. In many cultures, this golden rule appears in negative form. Don't do what you wouldn't want done to you. But Jesus flips it, makes it active, makes it possible. You breathe, long and deep. And for the first time in a while, the path ahead feels clear. Maybe not easy, but clear. And you whisper not to anyone in particular. Let me knock. Let me find. Let me shine. The path narrows now. Not just physically, but emotionally. You feel it in the way people shift their weight, the way their eyes flicker from Jesus to each other, then down to the dirt. Because what he says next, it doesn't sound like a parable. It sounds like a choice. Enter through the narrow gate, he says. Your pulse slows. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, he continues, and many enter through it. You glance behind you. The road down the hill is wide, well-worn, easy. But small is the gate, he says, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. You swallow hard. Only a few. You think back to everything he said so far, the blessings, the warnings, the prayers, the promises. None of it has been easy. All of it has been upside down. And now he says this road, this life, this kingdom, it's narrow. Not because it's hidden, but because it asks something most people never offer, their whole heart. Historians still discuss whether this narrow gate was a reference to an actual entrance in Jerusalem, a low arch where travelers had to unload their animals and crouch to pass through. A gate that required intentionality. Whatever the case, the metaphor lands. You think, what might I need to unload to pass through? Then Jesus warns of another danger. False prophets. Watch out, he says, they come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. You look around. Suddenly the quiet people seem wiser than the loud ones. He says, by their fruit you will recognize them. And just like that, you're back in the orchard of his teaching. Because good fruit doesn't lie. He says, do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? You chuckle softly. Of course not. Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. You nod. You've seen it. In others, in yourself. He says a good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. It sounds harsh, but it also sounds clear. You remember when he called you the light of the world. Now he's calling you a tree. What will you grow? He keeps going. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. You flinch, not because you're afraid, but because you care. So then he says, by their fruit you will recognize them. You think of the fruit of your last week. Were your words soft? Were your actions healing? Was your tone light enough to carry hope? Then comes the part that stills your breath. He says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. You freeze, because you've said those words. You've sung them, whispered them, even shouted them when you were desperate. He continues, only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Not the one who talks, the one who does. He says, many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? And you think those are good things, powerful things. But then he says, then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. The words land like a hush across the hillside, not because they're angry, but because they're honest. Knowing God isn't about doing impressive things for him. It's about doing real things with him. Quirky insight. The original Greek word for new here, ginosko, implies deep, intimate relationship. Not data, not distance, but closeness. So maybe the goal isn't activity, it's intimacy. And maybe the gate is narrow because very few are willing to slow down and let themselves be known. You sit still now, not with dread, with determination. Because this teaching, it's not a rejection, it's an invitation. Not to try harder, but to walk closer, to be known, to knock, and trust that someone will open. You sit in the silence he leaves behind, and for the first time, it feels like the sermon is breathing through you, not just into your ears, but into your chest, your spine, your bones. And then without warning or build-up, Jesus begins to tell a story. It's not long, but it's strong, like the foundation he's about to describe. Therefore, he says, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. You imagine it instantly. Stone, solid, sweat won, a house anchored to the earth. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. You brace for the ending even though you know it. Yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. You exhale. That's the goal. That's the hope. But then comes the other side. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. You see that too. The rushed foundation, the tempting ease, the smooth lies of shortcuts. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. And this time, and it fell with a great crash. The words crash too, in your chest, in your memory, in your habits. Historians still marvel at the structure of this final parable, how it distills the entire sermon into a single image. Two builders, same storm, one foundation. You glance around. No one is speaking now, because this isn't just a conclusion, it's a call. Jesus isn't asking if you heard him. He's asking what you'll do with what you heard. You think of the salt, the light, the prayers, the lilies, the plank, the gate, and now this house, your life. What's beneath it? What's holding it? A quirky archaeological detail. In regions of ancient Galilee, soft sand would often sit atop a harder layer of bedrock. So to build on the rock, you had to dig deeper, slower, longer. It cost more, took more time, but it lasted. You look at your hands, calloused, capable. But what are they building? Are you stacking hours and tasks and moments on shifting sand? Or are you digging down to truth, to trust, to the words spoken here today? Jesus doesn't end with applause. There's no altar call, no song, just the parable. And then he stops. No flourish, no thank you. He simply finishes and stands and turns and walks away. The crowd doesn't move because you're still processing not just what you heard, but what it means. Not just what it asks of you, but what it offers you. A way to live that doesn't sway with storms. A love that gives without trumpets. A father who sees in secret. A kingdom that starts now. You think back to the beginning, when he said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." And now here at the end you finally understand. Poor in spirit. Hungry for truth. Meek enough to dig. This is the gate. This is the way. And the house? You're already building it. One forgiven thought. One kind word. One faithful step. You stay seated long after the crowd begins to stir, because something inside you knows leaving too quickly would be like closing a book before you've read the final line. The wind rises gently again, not harsh, just enough to carry the scent of earth and sun-warmed grass. You trace your fingers through the dust beside you, and the last words of Jesus still echo, a house built on rock. You wonder how many in the crowd will build that way. How many will dig deeper? How many will hear these words and actually live them? You stand slowly, and as you make your way down the hill, you pass clusters of people murmuring. Some are debating, others repeating phrases. A few are already forgetting. But one man walks beside you silently, his hand on his heart like he's holding something too precious to drop. You feel the same. There's a sense that you've just witnessed something eternal. Something not just spoken but implanted. You reach the edge of a quiet grove and sit again because you need a moment longer to breathe it all in. And suddenly a memory rises not from today but from years ago. A moment when you reacted in anger, when your words sharp and unfiltered left someone crying. You've justified it since then. Blamed stress, excused your tone. But today, under the weight of if you are angry with your brother, those excuses don't hold. You realize it was a moment of sand, not rock. Jesus said storms would come, not if, when. And now you see it's not about avoiding the rain. It's about preparing for it. He said your Father knows what you need, and somehow that includes conviction. You reach for your water skin and take a long drink, not just to quench thirst, but to wash something, to renew something. The birds above you chirp lazily unhurried as if even they are living out Jesus' words. They neither sow nor reap, yet your Father feeds them. You smile, because earlier you missed that. You were too caught up in the grandness of the sermon to notice the softness. But now you feel it. This isn't just a kingdom of truth. It's a kingdom of tenderness. A quirky insight. In many ancient languages, the word for heart also included meanings of mind and soul. So when Jesus calls for purity of heart, he's not just talking emotion, he's talking integration, wholeness. You lean back, and you wonder, what does it mean to live with a whole heart? Maybe it's when your actions match your prayers. When your love is real, even when no one sees it. When your kindness costs something. Maybe it's when your private self is the same as your public one. You remember again, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. You'd smiled at that line earlier. But now it feels like a blueprint for quiet generosity, for invisible righteousness, for faith that doesn't need an audience. You look at your hands, they've done a lot of things, but now they'll build differently. You'll speak softer, forgive faster, worry less, judge slower. And when the storms come and you'll be standing, not because you're stronger, but because the foundation will be. And that foundation, it's not a philosophy, not a theory, not a scroll. It's a person. It's Jesus. You whisper that name now, just once, soft, like placing a stone exactly where it belongs. You rise again slower this time, not from fatigue, but from reverence. The hillside is nearly empty now, the breeze chasing away footprints and words alike, but something remains. You walk along the path, your feet brushing past wild thyme and small stones. And that's when you remember the narrow gate. It wasn't just a metaphor, it was a decision. And now with each step you wonder, am I on that path? Because it's not lit with signs. It's not marked by applause. It's quiet, sometimes lonely, but you feel its presence now. Jesus said few find it. And you think maybe that's not because it's hidden, but because it's hard to choose. You reach a small well and sit. The water reflects the late afternoon sky, golden calm. You toss in a pebble. The ripples remind you of his first words, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." And you realize the whole sermon was ripples. One truth after another, each spreading, touching everything. He wasn't giving laws. He was inviting you to build a life. You close your eyes, not to sleep, to remember, to hold what you've heard. You recall the lilies' effortless beauty clothed by God. You recall the sparrows fed without fields. You recall the Father rewarding what's done in secret. And then you remember the hardest part, love your enemies. You inhale sharply, because that one still aches. It's easier to love the lilies, easier to feed birds, harder to forgive the one who bruised your trust. But Jesus didn't leave it optional. He didn't soften it with conditions. He said to love them, to pray for them, to bless them, because that's what it means to build on the rock, to not just hear the words, but to live them. You rise again. And you know you can't stay here forever. The hill, the quiet, the clarity, they're gifts, but life calls you back, to the noise, to the neighbors, to the real. You turn and begin to walk down, and as you do, you whisper promises, soft ones, the kind only you in heaven hear. I'll forgive, I'll listen, I'll stay soft. Quirky tradition. Some early followers of Jesus would recite portions of the Sermon on the Mount before every major decision, as if aligning themselves with his voice could steady their own. You like that. Maybe you'll start doing it too. You pass a child playing with dust. He's building a little house, mud twigs, a flat stone roof. You crouch beside him. That your house, you ask. He nods proudly. Storm's coming, you say with a gentle smile. He nods again. But it's on rock. You laugh. Not because it's cute, because it's true. You stand and continue walking. And now with every step you notice something. You're not alone. Others walk the same path, silent, determined, not loud, but luminous. You smile. Because this narrow road, it may be quiet, but it's crowded with saints. The sky deepens to a dusky gold as you reach the edge of the village. There's a hush here, not like the one on the hillside, but deeper, denser, as if even the streets are holding their breath. You pass homes with low wooden doors, olive trees casting long shadows across courtyards, the scent of roasted garlic and baked bread lingering like memory. And yet your thoughts stay with him, with Jesus, with that voice not loud, not urgent, but steady. You remember how he ended the sermon not with a blessing, not with a warning, but with a parable. 2 builders, 2 houses, 1 storm. And now you wonder, what is your storm? You know it's coming. Not someday. Soon. It always does. Grief, disappointment, delay, moments when it feels like the winds are too wild, the rain too cruel. But now you have something you didn't before. A foundation. You reach your home and pause at the threshold. The door creaks as you step inside. It's small, simple, worn. But as you run your fingers along the wood grain, you whisper, "Let this be built on rock." You light a lamp and watch the shadows retreat. And with that glow comes a memory you are the light of the world. Not someone else. You. Not someday. Now. And it's not because you shine brighter. It's because you've seen the light. And you carry it. You sit by the window, feet tucked under you, and exhale. Not from exhaustion. From alignment. Because this sermon, it wasn't about behavior modification. It was about transformation. Inside out. Top to toe. It wasn't be better. It was be his. You look at your hands. Same as yesterday. But now they're different. Because they're his. And they're building something that lasts. The house on rock. The prayer in secret. The mercy over might. The peace that surpasses performance. Outside, the wind picks up slightly. A few loose leaves tumble past the doorway. And still no fear. Because you remember. The storms came to both houses, but only one stood. And now your spirit whispers, I will stand. A quirky, historical note. In early Christian communities, portions of the Sermon on the Mount were often sung in gatherings passed along not just by teaching, but by tone, as if rhythm could root the message deeper into memory. You like that. Maybe tonight you'll hum his words as you sleep. You lie back. The lamp flickers, and the house feels warmer, not from heat, from hope. Because now you know, the kingdom isn't far off. It's not after death. It's not beyond reach. It's here. In small acts, in quiet moments, in prayers whispered in closets, in forgiveness extended when no one's watching, in lilies, in sparrows, in secret. This is the rock, and you are standing on it. You close your eyes, not to forget, but to rest, because you've heard the words, and now you're ready to live them, one small step at a time, one quiet act at a time, one beat of grace after another. And when the rain comes, because it will, you won't crumble. You'll shine. You'll hold. You'll shelter others, because that's what houses on rock were built to do. And now, as the night stretches gently over your shoulders like a soft cloak, you let everything settle. The words, the images, the silence between each sentence. You feel the weight lift not because your burdens are gone, but because something stronger is now holding them with you. You picture the hillside one last time, the wind moving through tall grass, children sleeping against their mothers' robes, fathers sitting straighter than they have in years. You see Jesus again, not just teaching, being fully present, fully peaceful, the kind of peace that doesn't come from certainty, but from trust. You think of the lilies so still, so sure, so beloved, and you realize you're one of them, not just called to believe, but called to bloom. You breathe deeper now. Let your fingers uncurl. Let your jaw relax. Let your heart slow its rhythm to match the heartbeat of heaven. No noise, no need, just stillness. And in that stillness, you hear it again. You are the light of the world. You smile, because the world needs that light, and it's already inside you. Rest now. You're on the rock, and the rock never moves.